Over the years, I feel like I've heard people make fun of like the YouTube enthusiasts, right? Like, oh, you saw it on YouTube, so it must be true, right?
Right.
I think we can make a little fun of people when it comes to books like that now.
Well, that's what the self-published, because we had a little bit more security.
I don't even know about self-publishing that. I don't even know if I would put it solely on self-publishing. I mean, think about the controversy around like something like CRT, right? Critical race theory, which is really trying to interject like a more unbiased truth. And
you like, I'm gonna get your take on it, because I've been seeing this. I was a part of the writers' room. I was a part of, the auditions, the rehearsals, then the production. So I have a different perspective of this than you would just coming to see it.
Right. So
it should have auditioned
I can start this where I left off with Wakanda Forever.
Mm-hmm.
The acting was superb.
Mm-hmm.
Across the board, the acting was superb. It was like that edge of your seat type of performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people, unlike most superhero movies, a lot of people actually agreed with Killmonger. A lot of people agree with Killmonger. Like, a lot of our people was like, that nigga made a whole lot of sense. Like, Magneto in the X-Men. Like, a lot of motherfuckers agree with Magneto. Like, we hate to see that nigga lose every movie because we be like, nah, yo, he right.
Hey, what's up, people? What's going on? Welcome to the Binge Worthy Podcast with myself, Nate, and
G. Oliver. What's happening, y'all? It's been a couple weeks. What's going on?
Man, a lot has been going on. Just a lot going on in the news and life in this ghetto adulting world.
So ghetto.
So what you been up to?
I feel like the same thing you've been up to, Nate, because I remember like it's been we took a 2-week break. And has it been 2 weeks or one? Was it just 1 week? I thought it felt like maybe it was the same. It might have been the same week, right? Because I remember you hit me up and was like, yo, it's a lot going on right now. Can we take a 1 week break? And then so that was going into last week. That was last week. So ironically, I had the week from hell last week,
Mm.
right? So we didn't do Tuesday because you was already in the throes of a rough
Adulting.
week, and then my week got like, oh my god, like last week for me was um it was one of those weeks that don't happen often,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when it happened, boy, whew, I
Well,
went into the week
I
with.
must have beat you by a day or so.
I think you beat me. You know what? You beat me by a day.
Mm.
But I think I was already in it. I just hadn't realized just how bad it
Oh,
was
it ain't
about
hit
to
you
get.
yet.
It hadn't hit me yet, but it has started. Like the wheels had started. Like I went into the week with like a whole plan. It was a busy week. I had a ton of stuff to do. And literally like one thing changed that I didn't
Mm.
really have much control over.
That's
And
all it
that
takes.
just cascaded into it just started a series of events that just turned it from like by Friday, you're like, I don't have much hair, but if I could have grabbed it, I probably would have been pulling out like
Mm.
clumps of it. But
Mm.
it's over now. You know what I'm saying? Like I canceled my weekend stuff just because I
Oh, he
needed
had to take
time
a
to like
nap. Okay.
recuperate.
He needed
Like
a
it was
nap.
so bad. Like it just came out of nowhere. It was like one change
Mm.
that if it had happened like 3 weeks ago, it wouldn't have even been that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a convergence of like just unfortunate, like like a change that was
Right.
just not conducive to that particular week. And yeah,
Ooh, when you putting
hellacious is
conducive in
the
there, that mean it was strong.
hellacious. It was a hellacious week, bro.
Mm. Well, I feel you. One of the
But
reasons,
other
like
than
at
that, things been
home,
good.
but at home, I typically don't watch the news. Like I don't watch
Okay.
TV. I'm really not even. I live alone, but even during the pandemic, my TV never came on. Maybe once or twice when I wanted
Hmm.
to see a movie, and I really wanted to see it on a
Yeah.
big TV. And that was I probably can count on one hand. But um, just going into last week, watching the Tyree gentleman
Hmm.
be beaten, and really feeling desensitized to it, and then realizing at the hands of people that look like us, like it hit me in
That
a
that
wrong
that
way.
kind of made it. That made it special.
Because
That made
we're
it special.
always geared up to be angry and outraged, but
Hmm.
the thing that took all the air out of me was really seeing those five faces. Now they're not the only ones, and I hate the fact that they're the only ones being publicized. They're not
Right,
showing
front and center.
everybody else that was involved. That
But I read
really.
that the other two more officers have now either been fired or been placed on leave,
Mhm.
or have been added to the investigation.
Right.
Um, but yeah, just the fact that like we got like a third of the initial story where it was almost like this intentional, deliberate
Mhm.
um, act to shield the fact that there was some others involved. Um,
Right. And it was like a whole unit that they have allegedly disbanded right now.
right.
So that was kind of like the big iceberg for me. But it was being in the school system, as you know, and um, dealing with kids and parents, um, just being
Oh
an
yeah.
artist outside of all of that, running your own business. So we're technically now on the Artist Exchange platform. I'm no longer associated with my old station, breaking
Mm-hmm.
ties. Like, and that was the end of this year would have been 10 years on that station.
Mm.
And just, letting another year, I don't know how close you are, but I'm only a few months away from being 40 and not wanting to go into 40 because I don't even know how I got here. I can't tell you. I was just 25. I don't know what happened, but a lot of changes in my self, and more growth than changes. and just not wanting to go into another year for me doing the same thing, getting comfortable. I found myself, having friction with people more in the last year, and it's all just came to a head. And we're literally last week. And I just got tired of living for other people and what they saw for me and what they needed from me. And so it just was all just crazy. And I ended up actually I don't know. So we're gonna share like what we've been watching independently, and I got to go to a play at Everyman this year. Shout out to my big brother Jeff Russell Jefferson. I'm sorry. He's an arena player and he's also a resident actor at Everyman and a phenomenal actor. He did this play. He's in this play called Jump, and it's centered around grief as well as suicide. And all the things that come with it that leads up to it is a really interesting play. If you get a chance to go see it, please go check it out. It's a phenomenal cast. And what I've noticed from theaters like Center Stage, they're really tapping into real Black stories, not just the August Wilsons of them all or Lorraine Hansberry, but real Black stories. Not to say those aren't good, but we got tired of seeing that cycle of August Wilson being done at white spaces. But a real story, and it really culminated a week of distress. And then to go watch that, it really just depleted me, but at the same time, it energized me. And it just had a really good message, like communicate when you're not feeling well, because you leave behind, whether it be from death or suicide, you leave behind people always wondering what they could have done. So it's off season for suicide prevention, but it's definitely the season for it, because a lot of people are still coming out of the pandemic and really dealing with stress. I don't know what it was this year. This felt extra stressful, and I think this was probably our first year out, and everybody licking their wounds and trying to make sense of what the last 3 years have been, and politics and all that, and then let alone another police brutality at the hands of people that look like us. It just felt crazy. And even when I messaged you, I was preparing for it, but I was like, man, this ain't gonna work. This is not this is not gonna work. So so this year is really marking my year to really, in the words of Troy Burton, to own my own ass and just, go after the things. And it's hard because you put everything into everybody else, and typically, especially when you work hard, you really don't have nothing left for yourself, to, hold on to or be nurtured from. So that was my week in a rant. But yes, Jump at Everyman Theater opened on Friday. I got to go opening night. Go on opening night. They have a great pizza party afterwards. That's what I like.
Well, we've almost opening night now, so you can't redo opening night, but you should still go see.
They do the same thing closing night, so you got to.
Closing night. All right.
They do
When's the closing night date?
I believe this will run for like a month and some change. I got to get the exact date. I was trying to run and go get the playbill, but I don't know what I did with it. But
basically, people, y'all got some time.
But it's a play. It doesn't have an intermission. It's a play that very similar to when you went to came to see You Thought I Was Him. It dealt with it just leave you the whole time. It's gonna catch you off guard, but you gonna be thinking the whole time, and you gonna think you figured it out, and then it's gonna hit you with a whammy. No spoilers, but if you get a chance, I think it's a great play to go see. And I haven't really gone out to see much else. I'm planning to see some things. Tracy Jiggett play. What is it called? Don't Count Me Out is opening at Motor House on this Friday. So
okay.
It's an awesome. That's another awesome play, but it's more of a musical. Um, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Just figure out something, and people are getting out now, and things are happening more so
That
live
opens
now in
Friday.
person. Yeah, this Friday it opens up. Um, so just get out there and just participate, not just here in Baltimore, but wherever you are. Support the artists. Um, Many of us kind of were in a frozen state, even though we got some work thrown at us. So a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
are coming off of having to rebuild and rebrand ourselves. So go out there and support the arts, especially Black art.
Absolutely.
Go out there and support it. Anything you've been watching?
Uh, so last week I don't think I really watched much at all. So
Really took a nap.
no, nothing. Yeah, yeah. Well, no. I took the nap over the weekend. That's true, but through the week, I didn't really. No, I didn't really watch much. We did. We did watch Megan, which brought back for me. It was funny. I watched it.
Hmm.
I thought on it a little bit. I watched it a second time, and it was a very popular movie. Like it did well. It was like number one at the box office for a while. I think right up until Avatar came out. But it reminded me of our earlier conversation where we were talking about like this resurgence of like really good kind of like thriller and horror films.
Hmm.
Um, we talked a lot about how they're still struggling with that third act, and Megan is another one.
Hmm.
It was like 2/3 of the movie. I was like I was like, oh, this is really interesting, and then the third act happened, and it wasn't horrible or anything like that. It just you can tell that there's something about cracking that third act egg that is tough to do in that genre. So I
But
did see that.
you don't see the new wave of Black horror movies as not looking backwards, but the new way of telling Black history in a way,
So it in the films like that. So Megan is not at all like it's not at
hmm
all like a what we would call like a black film or
right.
something that we would talk about in that space. Um, but to answer your question, yes, because I mean I think the last two that we did talk about, which was we had a deep discussion about the one that won the awards at the Foreign Film Festival.
Hmm.
But yes, I when it comes to horror films that are produced by us, yeah, that element of like that real life trauma that we dealt with plays into it. Um,
mm
in which case, for me, I find those third acts to not really suffer from those problems. But our films are so far and few between that it gets really easy to get lost in the sauce of like the genre as a whole.
Right.
But it's
Right.
funny that you bring that up because what was the film we were discussing? We
Hey,
discussed
Davon.
in depth um, a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the horror movie genre. Um,
Was it the nanny
the
or
Nanny. So
right?
Nanny was one where yeah, I felt like I understood the third act. You know what I'm saying? So
mm
I feel like there's some people that might watch that film and say the same thing that I've been saying about other films is that, oh yeah, that was really good. And then yeah, but that ending, that last third of the movie was kind of. But I felt like it was dealing with themes that I connected with, or at least had a framework of understanding around it. So I understood, like I got some of the choices, and I think that leads right into our discussion around
hmm
like how we as viewers view things, and whether or not we should be reviewing stuff,
Mm.
when we lack that framework of understanding.
Well, I mean, just jump right into the
Because I feel
topic.
like I feel like that's the gist of the topic tonight. Like race
Well, I
and
called
review.
it race in review.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had saw some stuff on Twitter, and I
Right.
right before I messaged you about it, I had saw something on Facebook, and then
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, I was having conversations with somebody in it was like a theater group I was in, and we were having conversations about some Broadway shows being closed down. And as I started looking at some of the reviews for it, I realized there had been a big push from a lot of black celebrities in support of things like Strange Loop and
Uh-huh.
Ain't No More, Ain't No Mo,
Mm-hmm.
and August Wilson's play. Like it just feels like, and this is personally what I'm saying. It feel like
Mm-hmm.
they put a lot of black stuff on Broadway to open it up, and now they're
Mm-hmm.
pulling it back because Cats
Okay.
hasn't been, touched, or a lot of the shows that have been on Broadway for years has not
Right.
been touched. That just came back as well. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these black plays are being pulled down.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the second wave of them because it was already the ones that actually started Broadway back up, and then they were already shut down. And then this new wave of the Ain't No More and the August Wilson play and piano lesson.
Right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and Strange Loop, all those were kind of the second wave of plays coming out of the pandemic that now are being shut down. And people were buying out the house. It was
Mm-hmm.
celebrities. They said Beyonce and Oprah and all these people were buying up tickets and giving them away, or having private showings and all these things to keep the show going. One more
Mm.
weekend and one more night, and this is unfortunate. But
It
one of
is
the things
unfortunate.
that I don't know, the and you can touch on what you were reading on Twitter, but something that I've always known, um, I feel the difference between, say, black art in general and white art is the idea of conceptualism. And normally conceptualism is this idea that we came up with, and let's build a play or a movie or a TV show or art gathering or music around. And
Mm-hmm.
what I feel like our work is it comes directly from us. It's our story.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's either from history, directly from history, or it is, our story from an ancestor or something about us. It's
Right.
not an idea, it is actual factual information. And often our work is not seen that way. It's seen like something we just thought up of and we didn't put much thought into it, or something
Mm.
that is not as polished. I just presented an art show to a white space for the third time, and it wasn't approved. And the lady this time asked me, she asked would I want her feedback. And I said, sure. I just wasn't gonna, submit it there anymore. And and reading over her feedback, she just didn't get it. She didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And until I sent her the white information that I used to kind of be kind of part of the foundation, that's when she said, "Oh, I wish you would have just did that." Well, that's not me. That's not mine. That doesn't belong to me. This right
Mm-hmm.
here belongs to me. And going to, I remember we did the play Pearly before we went into the lockdown pandemic, and a white critic came out, and she had nothing to say about the acting. She had nothing to say about the story, other than it was outdated. Only
Mm-hmm.
real review that she gave was about the noisy stage of Arena Players. Before they pulled out the stage, it was still a little creaky, and
Right. Yeah.
that was the only review that she gave of the play, and I was like, and I feel like I really stretched myself. They had me up there singing and dancing, and I'm trying to figure out what play did she come see, like most of our nights
Right.
were sold out. All the feedback, but again, the feedback was from people that look like us.
Right.
And it's a difference. Now, I don't know, what were you reading on Twitter, or what?
So I actually don't know what I was reading on Twitter, because if you have Twitter, it's a long feed of thoughts and ideas.
Hmm.
What I
And
did,
not
I
even
had
full thought out ideas.
yeah, but I had stumbled on. I think what happened was I stumbled on a tweet
Hmm.
um, that was criticizing or like questioning the idea of like white critics
Hmm.
and the validity of their critiques on black
Hmm.
art. And I read a few of the comments, and then something happened, and it kind of pulled me out of it. Like I might have been at work, and I don't even remember where I was when I saw it. But
Hmm.
I remember it, and I made a thought to myself. I was like, okay, I need to come back around to that, because it was one of those things where like it was a tweet that showed up on my feed, and this happens often with Twitter. A tweet will show up, one person expressing their opinion, and you kind of immediately know that it might be a part of a larger conversation. Like
Right.
if I follow this tweet enough, or I start clicking into it and following some other people, I'm going to stumble into an article or somebody's like manifesto around this
Hmm.
particular idea. Like this tweet didn't manifest in a vacuum. So I kind of understood that, and I think I was scrolling through some of the comments, and then something pulled me off of Twitter or away from that particular
Hmm.
thread, and I just never got back to it. And then, like maybe 2 or 3 days later, you and I had our discussion about this
Hmm.
upcoming episode, and you mentioned this as a topic, and I was like, oh wait, I just saw something where
Right.
someone was critiquing that very thing. Um, so yeah, so I'm not. I felt like there may have been, because it was so close. I just felt like it had something to do with the Academy Awards, because it was so close to like this tweet. I feel like it might have been a day or two after the nominations for the
Well,
Oscars
I know
came out for the
two
Academy
shows were
Awards.
snubbed.
So
Both
yes, there's a lot of talk
Woman
about the
King
Woman
and
King
Emmett.
being snubbed, and Till.
Yeah,
Yes.
Till. Those two were snubbed from.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen them win any awards. And that young
Not
lady
one
until
nomination.
one nomination, but your young lady that
Oh
played
no, not one. I said not
not
one.
one.
I don't
The
think either one of them got a nomination.
right from any of the bigger award shows.
Right. Well, yeah.
Um,
I mean, and that's what we talk. Yeah.
and both the Woman King, hands down, I know had the numbers. I don't know quite about Emmett Till because I know a lot of people know the story and they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to feel uncomfortable like that again. And they should have watched it because the young lady that played Mamie Louise Till was phenomenal. And she had did
That's
some
what I've read.
independent films and some smaller films, but this was, and they specifically they specifically um casted her because she wasn't a big name and they wanted somebody with a fresh face to do this. And reading some of the articles leading up to it, but she did a phenomenal job. And I think a lot of the comments probably stem from that, but in general I've seen a lot of artists, specifically artists of, I'm gonna say black because I don't think uh uh, what is the phrase? Um, Artists of color. It doesn't just mean black anymore, but specifically, a lot of black artists are critiquing how their work is being criticized. Um, And criticism
Mm-hmm.
is one thing, but being some of your work being criticized, and I've been in that space before, but I've noticed a lot of artists speaking out now on social media. And that was the group
Yeah.
that I was in on Facebook. That's where it was. It was a lot of artists in there, and they were telling their stories of being critiqued in that way. And it took me back to a
Mm-hmm.
moment. I was doing a art show slash play at a theater, and I remember some people that were also resident artists there as well came in, and the director was like, "Oh, you missed a really great show. Nick did a really great job." And she was like, "Yeah, we went to go see my friend's play," which I wasn't angry about. She said, and she worked so hard on this. And it almost sounded
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, but they really ain't do much. And that was really their thought. And I heard from others that that's what their thought was. But I'm finding a lot of artists not necessarily complaining, but waking up. They're waking up to realize that they don't need a white voice to validate their work anymore. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
strong feeling to have, because many artists felt like they couldn't make it in the black art scene. They had to take their work outside, and they're having to take their work outside to get noticed. And sometimes I think, maybe more than sometimes, that is a truth, an unfortunate truth. But I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are now being picked apart so much that they're questioning, does this opinion even validate
Mm-hmm.
or should have such a strong um, hold on my work as an artist?
Right. And I think
Because they
that's
just
really
don't get it.
the
They don't share my
and I really
experience.
think that's the question, is knowing that it does hold so much weight, right?
Hmm.
Because the like our representation and like the critic space is so
Hmm.
small
Right.
that, just by default, these whiter voices tend to have more outreach.
Pull or influence.
Yeah, influence, outreach, and it's
And they
tough.
don't have
It's
that. They
it's
don't
it's
know
tough.
our stories to critique it.
Right, right. So they lack the frame of reference.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of times I feel like, and I've said this before,
Hmm.
polish is just access to capital. A
Right.
lot of times when you start talking about polish, I've always felt like, particularly in film, and then maybe even theater, it's just like, how much capital can you invest into the production?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like a lot of times when, for instance, like, you go to an Arena Players, and if you're a critic in Baltimore City, like, you should know that you're going to the oldest still operating African American theater in the country. So that should tell you a couple things. One,
Hmm.
that it's a rarity. Two, it's underfunded. Um,
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore, not anymore. But but
Not
but
anymore.
let's be clear about something. Like, without like, not without like trying to tarnish or not acknowledge the impact of that blessing, I would
Right.
still argue that the Arena Players is drastically underfunded when you
Hmm.
consider
For the time that it's been here.
who has come out of the Arena Players, the
Hmm.
legacy of the Arena Players. Like, there's no reason for the Arena Players to not be, from a polished perspective, right? As polished as Everyman, or whatever theater is, Center Stage, all of those
Hmm.
things, right? But my thing is, you going into a show at the Arena Players, those things should be known. So for you to focus on the fact that you can hear the stage when people walk across it versus the show that you're actually there to see.
Hmm.
Um, First of all, something about that particular thing that just sounds incredibly disingenuous to me. Like you didn't want to have anything to say about the play. You were nitpicking. But I think in the larger conversation, I think that's a real it's a real issue. I think that particularly when and I mean we're talking local. We're talking Baltimore local theater scene.
Mm-hmm.
And for you and I having being a part of the arena family and wanting that same respect to be given to them and the critiques of their performances and their productions. I think it just gets extrapolated when you start talking about the folks that of our hue who are operating, on the Hollywood level.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know what the solution is to it. I'm always going to support the idea that we need to support our own. We need to have our own, critics, and we need to have our own publications that are responsible for getting the word out and critiquing shows and things like that. But I also know that we want to play on that stage with everyone else as well. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like a two-step. You know what I mean? Like we part of the problem is that we need more of us, our voices, critiquing our work. But even if we had that, I think we'd still have that desire to play on that world stage. In which case, we run into the same problem anyway.
It
But I'll
feels
be
like
honest with you, yo. I'll be honest with you. I have the conclusion that a lot of the stuff I ignore a lot of it. I just I might read it. But I remember that the reviews for Black Panther weren't the greatest. The original one, the original Black Panther, and there were parts that people were praising, but then there was a lot of I still, you're not really you're not into the comic book films that are that heavy, right? I am. And
is that where most of
I was telling,
the backlash is coming
I tell
from?
people this all the time. Well, it wasn't so much backlash. It was just,
Criticism.
I felt that there were things that they didn't get. Some of the major conversations that we were having in the Black community over Black Panther, just for instance, the validity of Killmonger's argument in the movie or his position in the film were completely lost on most white critics. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But it all comes down to this. And I had a conversation with some friends the other day, and I was like, I don't think people realize that when you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the original Black Panther, at the time it crossed the $1 billion mark, right? It's the only solo film to ever do that, right? At the time. Okay. So when we talk about how much, Iron Man made and Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3, Captain America 1 and 2, when you looked at the most successful Marvel films financially, the only one that sat in the top 5 was Black Panther. I'm sorry, the only solo film that sat in the top 5 was Black Panther. And then as time went on, right, because you got movies that came out after Black Panther. So by the time we get to Black Panther 2, so there was 2 films that I think had gone. There were 2 films that grossed more than the original Black Panther at the time that like Black Panther 2 came out. And I still felt like I was having that conversation around the time that Black Panther 2 came out. And I was like, yo, I think my argument still holds true because there were two films in particular that were solo films, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of them was Captain America Civil War, which had every hero in the MCU up to that point in that one film. So really it was like Avengers 2.5, right?
Right.
And the Spider-Man film, No Way Home, which the whole second act involved bringing in the previous two Spider-Men into the film, right? So technically solo films, technically, but relied very heavily on, you know, all of these different characters. And they're the only two solo films that have ever outgrossed Black Panther. So, you know, like there's people out there that just, you know, we don't listen to critics. No way. But I feel bad. So in film, I feel like critics matter a little less, especially in the bottom line. Because once we start talking about a film and it's like, yo, you need to go see that, like that movie's gonna do well, right? Or it's gonna do better.
But I guess the original role, I think social media has replaced, I don't want to say the need for critics, but they have replaced somewhat of the impact that a critic had. I remember I used to watch, what was it? Cisco and Ebert. I used to watch that.
Cisco and Ebert, yeah.
Like it was an actual television show. I mean, it was, but I used to watch that.
I used to watch that too.
Right. So their opinion mattered because I knew what movie I was going to go and beg my mother to take me to go see, or my aunt to take me to go see. So but that has now been replaced by the average Joe starting a conversation on that thread as we're doing right now. So it's their impact and just the arts in general is really to convince you or not to go see something. So it hurts when the loudest voices in that area, that's kind of like a dying art now, is saying negative things about something that they've done research on it, but they have no experience in it.
Right, they've seen it,
so
but
you're telling me how to tell my own story. You're validating my actual story. And that's what happens when you are critiquing Black art. Very few Black arts are conceptual. I think that we just got a rise of conceptual Black art with this new MLK statue. But outside of that, well, that's conceptual art. But the idea of art coming from a concept versus someone's DNA or life experience is a toss up, because and it's the same reason when we had like the first show of this season, when I reiterated, my students, I don't grade their art. I grade the technique that I showed them and how well they executed that. But their art is not something you can really grade because it didn't come from me. Like I didn't tell them to do that. So I can't really teach them how I would do it. And I think that's a bad teacher that will do that. And I've had those types of art teachers. But I think it's hurtful, one, because we rely so much on them to tell us or validate our work. And it hurts because we get caught up in the muck and mire of it, because we then start believing that. We believe when the Oscar says this was the best actress, that was the best actress. No, we put so much weight on it. I mean, for the most part, we put a lot of weight on it.
Like
telling somebody that we want.
I feel like the industry puts a lot of weight on it. Yeah, okay, I'll take that. I'll agree with your
And
statement
when I
in
said
that
we, I
we
meant
do,
like
because
we
I think
as
it increases
artists,
an actor's as an artist.
right? We
Mm,
put a lot of weight on that opinion. We
well,
campaign. We campaign so much when we're up for an award, and it does not
yeah, but I
validate
don't.
you.
Yeah, I feel like we campaign. Um, I feel like we campaign because we're so seldom included. So
Hmm.
when we are included, it triggers this need, this push. Like, yeah, you want to like finally, you know what I'm saying? You want to
Right.
support it, and I think that's natural for us. I think that's natural of a culture of people to do. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because we want to see our folks being rewarded or recognized. I don't want to say rewarded, but
Hmm.
recognized in the highest sense, um, for all of the things. Um, Unless we feel like they're being recognized for the wrong things, Denzel and Training Day, Holly and Monsters Ball, types of
Right.
things. So there's some caveats with that, but um,
And pause for a second. Could you imagine Angela Bassett playing that role in Monsters Ball?
could I imagine? Yeah, I could.
Would you
Um,
believe that she turned it down?
yes, I would believe that. I could imagine her in that
Hmm.
role. I can absolutely imagine her turning that role down. Um,
People have just
because of her
gotten a hold of
because
a
of her
clip of
brand
her mentioning it.
because of her brand. You know
Right.
what I mean? No matter where you are, in I feel like no matter where you are in the stage of being an artist, I think this is
Right.
true for every artist. Like you have to build, and then you have to protect your brand, right? Part of that is knowing who your audience is, the
Hmm.
people who are supporting you, what they enjoy, right? Because it's still entertainment at the end of the day, right? Like, so it's like
Hmm.
knowing those things. I can absolutely see Angela Bassett being like, "Oh hell no, nah, y'all ain't
Some
about to
people
have me
have
out here
gotten a
bent
hold
over,
of some interviews she's did,
bent
and
over
now they're
backwards
bringing it back up.
for no Billy Bob Thornton. No, that ain't about to happen. I can absolutely see that. I could see,
Right.
I could see her husband, Courtney B. Vance, turning down a lot of roles that either don't sit right in his spirit as far as like his brand or the image that
Right.
he wants to portray
Right.
in that in the uh 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 within, like, the framework of the brand and like the image that he has created for himself, right?
Right.
Not that he felt like, oh, I can't do that, I couldn't pull that off. It's just like, hey, that doesn't really fit with, I think actors have those conversations, like, that does not fit with my brand, like that type of role. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
take a Will Smith. You know what I'm saying? For a long time, you know, Will Smith did roles that were very, very much um, in line with a brand for him,
Hmm.
right? And I think
Right.
that he started to expand or experiment with, play with that brand more. Like he did he did a small little indie film, you know,
In the
6 Degrees
beginning.
of Separation
Yeah.
when he was young. I think he was just really testing his waters, but I think he quite understood, coming from the Fresh Prince the rapper into Fresh Prince the TV star into a movie career, and there are shifts in that, but I feel like he had a brand that he maintained for a long time until it didn't work anymore, and then you started to see him kind of veer off into what I would call like much more mature types of roles. And he's had mixed results since he started doing that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but branding is important. And yeah, I could absolutely see, you know, and I've read and heard stories about Denzel Washington being incredibly particular about the roles that he chooses. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, like there's a documented thing where he was very, very adamant about not being involved in a romantic scene with Julia
I think
Roberts in the
kissing, yeah,
Pelican Brief.
kissing her. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she even talked about how she was like distraught because she thought she was gonna have an opportunity to have her little steamy scene with Denzel. And Denzel was like, nah. You know what I'm saying? So when you
Gotcha.
watch the Pelican Brief, you see that tinge of sexual tension in the air, but it's just, you know, it's handled in a way where it's like it could, but it doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And Denzel apparently had a thing where he was like, I'm not gonna have any intimate scenes with white women.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't until much later in his career. I think the first time we see him in a like, and I don't even know if you could call it intimate, was in Spike Lee's We Got Game. And he got game. And if you remember, there was like a whole sex scene between him and the white chick. I think she was a prostitute, and
But that
lived in his
was
building.
further
And
back.
that wasn't it, huh?
That was further back though.
Well, it was further back, but I mean, let's talk about Denzel's career. We talking about like a 40-year career. So 20 years ago
But
was
I'm saying
20 years in for him.
may have sparked his decision. I'm not doing this ever again.
Oh no! Before that, like that, He Got Game came out like I think.
Wasn't it the 90s?
If you look at his, yeah, that was the 90s. Like I think He Got Game probably came out like maybe somewhere between 95 and 97. But if you look at all of Denzel's films going back to as far as like Ricochet and the two movies that he did where he was My Beloved what is it My Beloved Country, The Mighty Quinn. When you look at that all the way up to you know up until like He Got Game. Yeah, he didn't because Malcolm X came out in 92. So He Got Game had to have come out like 5 to 7 years after that. So we talking about like 95, 97, somewhere around that time.
Right.
And I don't know how true it is, how adamant he was. We know that there's a rumor that was part of his thing. He was like, I'm not interested in having, you know, I don't mind having white female co-stars. I'm not going to be engaging in like sex scenes or romantic relationships on screen with them for a while. And we do know that within that time period, because the Pelican Brief came out like 1990. You know what I'm saying? So like, but yeah, I think there's a brand. And then when you look at Halle Berry, I don't know if she, you know, like you look at Halle Berry, I don't know if she ever really had much of a brand. I feel like Halle was one of those actresses that was just like, if a part, you know, like I think she was more open to certain things. You know what I'm saying? And like one of the things that she was clearly open with was
artist. I liked her indie films a lot better than the blockbuster movies that she did.
Well, a lot of her indie films are really good. A lot of her independent films are really good.
And those were stuff that I didn't know that she produced and executive produced herself, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But going, kind of fitting all of this into the topic for today, it really, as a Black artist now, and I think me choosing to go to Coppin really kind of shaped this in me. Up until that, I went to more white schools, and I saw that side of it. I saw what was considered great for them, and I just was like, "Oh, this is bull," because that's horrible, you know. And that was just my perspective, you know, learning Black art at a young age. I just knew, something not 100% with that. But as I've grown older, I've watched many of my peers and people who I admire choose a white path so they can get more visibility, so they can get more integrity in their brand or in their art. And it hurts me only because I know how great we are. I understand their decision, but
Mm-hmm.
often it is the reason why we don't have certain standards, or we don't have certain, we're not looked at as having quality. And I'm living in this
Looked
city
at by
where
who?
well
And I asked that
it's
question because
me saying that,
you saying that
but
it shows
it's
like
really us that thinks that. We think that. And it's
okay.
not necessarily that we haven't been shown that by others, by other
Mm-hmm.
cultures, but it's more so we feel that. We feel like
Yeah.
we're not up to standard because often we don't have the resources.
I don't know. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think that, there are shows at the arena players, for instance, that will be sold out the whole run, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people who consistently show up to those shows, like, there's no doubt in their minds about the quality of the performances,
Mm-hmm.
the need for the timeliness of the performances, the need for the performances, and then
Mm-hmm.
from a technical perspective, like the sheer like amazingness of what you're able to do. Like what is produced out of the arena players. The question then becomes though, is it enough? You know, arena players for years has consistently produced shows that are routinely could be, sold out performances every night. And I think there's this reality that is it's a really bitter reality that
Mm-hmm.
even when you can pack your house day in and day out for a 3 week, 6 week run of a show, that you still come up short um in terms of like being able to expand, being able to build on, you know what I mean? Like, here it is, you can sell out shows and still need things like reinforcements or rebuild of the stage or the rebuild of the sound system, and
I'll say it like this.
and having the fight, because even though
Right.
I know that recent investment is momentous, I know that didn't happen overnight. I know that's something that has been being talked about and probably petitioned for.
Nope.
No?
It was a decision somebody made, and it happened like that. So all it took
Okay, so that was one
was
of those.
it was
But I
in
also know
part
that,
like
like,
I mean it was the hard work that, because had they not survived all these years,
mm-hmm,
it would be nothing for somebody to say, hey, let's help them out. But all it took was someone in a seat of power to say, hey, this place has
right,
been underserved, while you all are giving thousands upon thousands of dollars to these
to
organizations
these
over
places.
there.
Yeah.
And this right here has been a benchmark. I'll
Mm-hmm.
say this. So the last play that I did at Arena Players, and we're not gonna make this about Arena Players, I was doing more of the marketing. I was sending out, I did a really good press release, sent it to
Yeah, you
all
did.
the critics and sent it out. Cricket.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until one of the funders from a white organization that funded the production said, "This is great. Let me put this on our calendar, and
Mm-hmm.
let me get our team to send this out to some people." That's when we got responses from those very people
Yeah.
months before that I had sent out the same press release to. Just
And that's a
they sent
really
the press release that I created to those
mm-hmm.
people
But because of where it was coming from, got all
because
the
of where it
difference.
was coming from.
And that's such it's such that's the bitter part of the bullshit that
Mm-hmm.
just exists across the
Yep.
board when it comes to shit like that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's what. So I say all that to say that when when we see our brothers and sister artists making those decisions to go down a certain path,
Crossing over is what they call it.
or crossing over,
Mm-hmm.
um, like I try not to be too critical of the decision because honestly, like I feel like I get it. You know what I'm saying? Because if you can have all the support over here, but it's not allowing you to thrive and grow, you know what I'm saying? And like there've been some people that I feel like have cracked that egg where they've been able to take the support and, like, for lack of a better word, monetize it into something that they can continue to like grow and build and produce bigger and better, right?
We're
And
seeing that in a lot of our older artists that are now like the Jay-Z's or
mm-hmm.
the MC Lights, the Queen Latifahs, the Will Smiths, the Denzel that have crossover appeal is the other term that they use. Meaning
Right,
white people like them,
white
but they
people like
feel
you,
very much
right?
so
That's all
black.
that. That's all it means. White people like you. You
Right.
you are you
And it
are
and it's
palatable to the white
sitting
audience.
sitting and trying to push my way as to be an entrepreneur. It really because I'm not as vocally black power as some people are, but I've only worked as a black artist in black
Mm-hmm.
spaces. I've worked in white spaces, but in the capacity that I was the only black person there or one of very few. And that does not feel good. I've never been one of
No,
them people that wanted to ever wear a badge of saying I'm the only black person that works
it's
there. Like
very
that doesn't
uncomfortable.
appeal to me.
It's very uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable because you become the safe one. So they begin. I remember Bill Cosby when he did that tour that was very infamous for him, where he was telling men to pull up their pants. Part of the conversation he was having was he's in these rooms and he's looked at as the safe one because of the Cosby Show image. He's
Mm-hmm.
considered the safe one, and they're having conversations about other black art or artists that makes people like him like it makes me uncomfortable. I've been in those rooms where I've
Mm-hmm.
heard people talk about arena players or black art organizations. I've been a teaching artist for years. I worked at a white teaching artist establishment and listened to how they talked about the other companies I worked for. And I had
Mm-hmm.
to remain silent. I felt I had to remain silent. And I began to feel like I was being pushed out when I would speak up or push back. But
Yep.
it and we've had this conversation a lot about building our own platforms and
Mm-hmm.
having our own award shows and we're kind of split on it, but at the same time the reason I say those things and push for those things is because I've been in those rooms and I've heard the conversation. I've heard
Yeah.
the things that they say about us when their work is shitty at best. And they're and even calling arena players the longest continuously operating community theater in the United States. I've been to white theaters. We performed in white theaters that are just as shitty.
Mm-hmm.
That backstage is just as shitty. But because they have a legacy behind them or finances, really, they get more respect than
Mm-hmm.
not.
Right.
I having I have a Kennedy Center credit on my resume, and I remember this lady trying to hire me, and she looked past everything else that I had did, and that's what fell on her eye.
Right.
Wow, you performed at the Kennedy Center, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand the prestige of doing that, but baby, like that was this allure director credit. I this
Right.
the shit that I've spent. That was easy for me to get. This
The
over
shit
here
that
was
yeah,
hard.
like yeah, the shit that they find so incredible and amazing is just some
Hmm.
shit that we did for fun.
And
Yeah.
I found myself doing that. I found myself trying to work at the Peel Center, trying to get a job at the BMA, trying to
Mm-hmm.
work at Roland Park, school, and try to do the things that would get the attention. And I'm sitting there like, this don't matter. It don't matter
Mm-hmm.
because they're only going to see this when I get a chance to let them see it. The art show that I just said, I just for the third time, I was like, Miss, I don't. you can give me your feedback, but I'm probably not going to read it. And even in me reading it, it was like she don't get it. And this is the same person that's put in charge of determining who's good enough. And that's the dangerous part of this, because what is most dangerous, some of us are starting to occupy those spaces and they're starting to think the same way the person who they replaced, who got in trouble or pushed out for
Well,
having that same mindset.
that's your 5 black cops beating on an unarmed black man right there.
Yep.
Because there are, you know, we used to
With
think
body
that
cams on.
representation was going to be enough, and we're finding out that it's not. And one of the things that I hate to this day, even if there's truth behind it, because I'm not going to say that there's no truth behind it. I still hate it when I hear it. The whole, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And I'm not going to argue the validity of this statement. I still hate when I hear it. I hate when people say it.
But you know what,
I hate
George?
the way that we throw it out.
I've had conversations with those people. With those people.
No, I have to. It's true.
And part of it is it's an eagerness to win. And I know that
it's
frustration.
An eagerness to win, right? It's an eagerness to win, and it's a desire to just succeed, to be successful.
At what cost? At
to
any
be successful.
cost.
And I think that we all, the funny thing is, like, and I'll tell you why I hate it, because, and while I understand it is true, I hate it because, I think I wouldn't hate it so much if we, like, we hadn't been so denied. You know what I'm saying? I hate it because I've had conversations with those people, and to be completely transparent, I've been in situations where I started to question whether I was teetering that line of being one of those people. And what I ultimately, like, came to understand is, like, it's like, you work in the schools, I work in the schools. There are things that I want to say. There are people who I'd like to call out that, quite frankly, would get me fired. It would get me fired.
He said, Chelsea says they love to name drop.
Who love to name drop? Who's that?
He was like people that get put in those higher positions.
Yeah.
Love to name drop.
But I realized, like, in my position, if I said what was truly on my mind, if I called out some of the things that I would feel great, but I would also almost immediately probably lose the ability to, like, take care of my family.
Yeah.
And that's a scary ass position to be in. So I say all that to say that I hate it, because whenever a lot of times when I see people doing that bullshit, right? Like touting them ideas, or spewing those keywords and those lines that we know ain't coming from them. We know where it's coming from. I just be like, damn, bro, like, shit. Because I know, I feel like they might be in that same boat where they see the shit, they want to say the shit, but they just can't. And I feel like I've had conversations. Like, I sat on, for 4 years, I sat on the civilian review board for Baltimore City, right? Like, the entity that is outside of internal affairs, the only civilian entity in Baltimore City that is actually allowed to review and then basically, like, adjudicate over instances of police misconduct. So in that role, I found myself having in these spaces where I got to have conversations with a lot of police officers, right? And it's Baltimore City. In Baltimore City, like, I don't know if people know this, but like like 75, 80% of the force is black.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had conversations with these guys that like they're black cops. You know what I'm saying? And I got the same kind of notion that even at 80% of the force, saying certain things, standing up for certain things, calling out certain people, is like, yo, I'm gonna be relegated. You know, I might get fired. You know, worst case scenario, I get fired. You know, but you know, like they ain't gotta fire me. They could relegate me to some, you know, basement office where I'll never see another promotion. You know what I'm saying? So it's just tough. You know what I'm saying? And then you have your people, we have our people who have just completely disconnected from the whole system, right? And they just like, yo, fuck that. Like, I'm gonna do what I want, I'm gonna say what I want. But if you got friends like that, you know that they go through it. They go through it.
I mean,
know what I'm saying? So there's no win-win situation, because it's like if you black, whichever way you go, you're gonna be consistently in a state of like questioning yourself, wondering if you on the right path, if you have people that you're responsible for, right? Like then the weight of that gets into it. So that's why I really hate it. I simultaneously understand that there's like real truth and like all kinfolk, you know, all skinfolk and kinfolk, and I still despise it when I hear it. Like it makes me physically cringe when people say it. And if you watch me close enough, in conversation, you will see me like, ugh.
Right, but it's one decision that will bring you from this side to that side. And typically it's the yearning to want more. And at what cost? And to what degree? And what are you willing to sacrifice? And what are you willing? And I've seen it happen. One of a space that I left, I remember right before the pandemic, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Because I was sitting there in this white establishment waiting for the shoe to drop. I was waiting for the racial remark. I was waiting for it. And I found it. And when it happened, I was like, oh no. I'm a part of the problem. Because I was allowed to bring in people and figure out, and I began to neaten up the people that I was bringing in. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. No. Sorry. I can't do that. And I went to them and was like, I can't with the conscience do this anymore, because I began to do the thing that I despise that had happened to me, happened to many artists. And oh no, we can't be that anymore. And it was guilt that was setting in. I was walking away from a paycheck. As an artist, that's something you like, a steady, and I just couldn't bring myself to make that choice anymore. But I've also worked in black art places where their yearning to be like the white establishments led them to make decisions about their own people that was totally disrespectful. And it really left me in a space of feeling guilty and angry all at the same time, that you are even put into a predicament to make those types of choices where you got to decide, do I keep my home? Because I'm sure a lot of those police officers, I know where some of them live. They living out in the Owens Mills and the PAs of it all, and trying to figure things out. You know, I got to keep my home. I got to keep my life. I can't afford. And that one decision that you make to be selfish really is the trickling down effect of, now we're in a space of being critiqued by white people and wanting that critique so I can then be validated. And like you said, there aren't many known black critics out there to criticize our work and to validate our work. And
then in the framework of this conversation, what if there was? What did he or she had to do to get there? You
To
know what I'm
be
saying?
honest, in
Like that's the
Baltimore,
real.
specifically in the theater scene, there are Black voices.
Okay.
Some of them don't show their faces though. Like the white
Yeah,
critics
like
often
internet
you kind of
personalities.
know, but they make themselves known. They come up and introduce themselves. The Black critics often don't do it. One of my
Mm.
favorite art critics in the city is Miss Angela. And she used to write for Be More Art magazine. She now works with various art organizations. She works with the Black Arts District now. I remember first meeting her, and she walked in. She saw my art show. She wrote a phenomenal review from it. Did not even know me from anything,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just she just stumbled upon it. I don't get to meet many, even in doing these. I've been doing podcasts for almost 10 years now. I've met maybe 5 that were good, that were decent, that was honest, that did their job. And I'm not saying I met others that didn't. I was lucky to meet those 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it is crazy that in a city that is Black, that you have trouble finding people in those types of positions to be able
Yeah.
to validate. You don't have to, sugarcoat your criticism, but to
Mm-hmm.
come out and speak to my experience, because your opinion will come from a place of I understand this. I get this.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be good, but I get this. I get what they're doing.
Even if I don't particularly like it,
Right,
but I get it. But
right,
I
right.
understand. At least I have a framework of reference for what it was you were attempting to
What
say.
you were attempting to do.
And I may not have liked your execution. I may not have
And you
I
hear
may
that in the
not have made a
word.
connection with the actors,
Yep,
but yeah,
yep.
right. And
And
I
I've
think
done
that's
the
the
thing as an
problem
actor.
is
I've
that
tried
when
to
you read
perform
these
at white
white reviews
spaces.
of our work, it is very
Yep.
clear that basic lack, there's a basic frame of
Disconnect.
reference that is just lacking and a disconnect, which
Mm-hmm.
makes you disconnect, which makes me as a reader disconnect from what the fuck the critic is saying.
But look what happens. Look what
But
happens when we go into their environments and we do
mhm,
a great job. Then I've never received my best ever review ever. I was in a Black show directed by a Black person with a Black cast at a white theater. I won awards. I was on the front
mhm,
page of the city paper. I got best of, like I was winning for that play. It was just, and I in my mind I said, if this play was at Arena Playhouse, would any of them had come? When I say the theater could only seat like 30 people in it.
mhm,
It was a obscure. It was in like an abandoned kind of one of those old stores down at by downtown. It became
mhm,
like a storefront church type of theater company. And I said to myself, if I had did this, and then and what made it true to me, I worked with a totally different cast of people at another space that they own, did another Black play, got the same type of reviews from it. And I
mhm.
was like, if these pieces were done at Arena Players that's just up the street, nothing would have
Now,
happened.
are you saying is your issue that people wouldn't have come to see the show, or that are you positing that their reviews would have been like completely different, or
Both,
both?
both.
Both.
Because what happens is, like here, you used to be able to go to NPR, um, WEAA, and tell somebody you were doing a play, everybody would come out and see it.
Mm-hmm.
You at Arena Players, you go to the same place, a couple people may come and see it
Mm-hmm.
because
Now
they
you talking
heard
about
it.
audience, general audience,
Audience,
or like
but
critics?
I'm speaking because often critics go what they hear people talking about. Now critics are looking on social media and seeing what people
Mm-hmm.
are talking about. And if your piece is getting a lot of buzz, then I'm gonna come see it.
Uh-huh. Right.
That's how they're now choosing to come see work outside of them having a personal relationship with the theater or the venue or the director. And it is weird to me that it works that way. And now I do understand why August Wilson went to white theaters to get his work workshopped, and why these white theater, you know, creative directors had this wonderful relationship with him, and we didn't really have that, you know, in the black, because he went to places that he thought were of quality. And I get that. I understand it. It's the reason why an actor will go to a Harvard or a Yale versus a Howard. They just go receive a certain level of esteem. You know, Mike, what's his name? Angela Bassett and her, they went to Yale. So they have a certain prestige in their acting ability versus, you know, Taraji P. Henson, who went to Howard. You know, and it's I understand the prestige element of it. What I don't understand is why you don't see that in your own spaces. Why can't you invest that? And I'm not saying that these people never invested in their black selves, but why can't you see that here? Because if truth be told, you could put a Felicia Rashad up against an Angela Bassett and they're equal. Difference is Felicia Rashad went to a Howard versus Angela Bassett, who went to a Yale.
Felicia
Comparable.
Rashad is a professor at Howard.
Now
Like
she's
the
a
dean of the theater
dean,
department, right? Yeah.
but it just is, you know, it's equal. You know, you have, you know, just as many good actors from Coppin as you know from Morgan, as you know from maybe Towson or Loyola. It's comparable, but we put this extra lick of quality because it's coming from a non-black space, and that was kind of went into me, you know, talking to you about the topic for tonight, because it just, at what point do we qualify ourselves to best tell our stories, and why don't we have more black critics out there, or reviewers rather,
Right.
really making their voices heard?
Because I
We
feel
have
like
bloggers and stuff like that, but are they being
I feel
heard?
like the reason that we had, you know, from my perspective, the reason why we don't have that many black critics is the same reason why we, you know, we're still behind the curve when it comes to like black writers and black directors and black
Right.
cinematographers and black sound engineers, black editors. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we've been, you know, like this is why, you know, a lot of people say I've been called what's the word when you're like too forgiving, or
A
understanding,
sympathizer.
right? Like too sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand our history, yo, and it's like it's not like we didn't have these skills. You know, like we were denied.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
It's not like we're not
anytime, you know,
excellent.
anytime I think about where our people are lacking,
Right.
when in the industry, right? You and I, we talk mostly about entertainment and we talk about film and we talk about theater, but any industry,
Mm-hmm.
any area of life, home ownership, generational wealth, all of these things, to me, like it always comes back to Tulsa. I was like, I think that, you know, a lot of people are just kind of coming. A lot of people just finding out about Tulsa, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
recently in the last couple years. Like I've known about the Tulsa massacre since I was like 10,
Mm-hmm.
and the Rosewood massacre before the movie came out. And what I don't think people grasp is that this was happening all over the South.
Yep. And
That
North.
when you talk about Black people today and why we behave and why we make some of the choices that we make, I don't think that people are putting into context the fact that, like, it's one thing to have this belief. I think most people believe that I think most people really do believe that if we just we just pulled our pants up, we stopped cursing, if we we stopped drinking alcohol, we stopped smoking weed, then we could just get it together, and then we could, everything would be okay. And I really don't know. Sometimes I really question how many people really understand that there was a long period of us building things that were intentionally and deliberately attacked and destroyed and torn down.
Yep.
Not once, not twice, but like hundreds and thousands of times.
Yeah.
And like what type of generational traumatic effect that has on people. Like how long, Nate, could you as an individual have an entity come through and tear everything down that you worked hard to build? How many times before you just be like, fuck it? Like, I'm not putting in that effort in no more. I'm not putting in that time. I'm not putting in that dedication. You know what I'm saying? And we talk a lot about generational trauma, but every time I hear people have conversations about generational trauma, they go all the way back to slavery. And I'm like, yo, you ain't got to go that far back.
Hey, E Digger.
What's up, E? Like
it's
amazing. Like
it hurts only because
yeah, I say that. I just say that to say that, like, I that's why I choose to have some grace and why I'm sympathetic or understanding, because I understand, like, I feel like I understand like what our people have really been through. And I just wonder sometimes, like, well, how many times can you burn a nigga shit down before they're just like, yo, it ain't even no point? Because I feel like that's where we at today. You know what I'm saying? And I hear a lot of shit that people say about the black condition today, even our own.
Right.
And
it was a movie. I was trying to watch it over. You know how you sleep, but you're trying to watch something. And I was trying to watch this movie, and it was about these. I believe it was two brothers that bought a bank, and it was
the banker.
bank. Yeah, I think we
Apple
was.
TV.
I think we were supposed to watch that at some point.
And they had to put the white face in front of it.
Right, and they eventually owned some property that they couldn't technically put in their whole name. I think somebody had left one of the brothers some property, and he couldn't totally put it in his name because it was in a white area. And I'm looking at that, and some of us look at that as if it's just a movie and don't realize those were two real people.
That's a true story.
And I think we looked at the Rosewood movie and thought that was just cinematography at its best. No, that was a real story. And I especially living in a space now where people are actively.
Let me
go ahead.
Let me
it was
say
called
this,
Bankers. That's what it was.
There's probably some truth in what you're saying, but I actually think what's more of it is that people understand that Rosewood actually happened and Tulsa actually happened, and like the banker is a true story. They think that they're isolated incidences.
Right. It could never happen to me.
And that's what I don't think people really grasp, is that Tulsa is the embodiment of a phenomenon of black towns being ransacked and terrorized and burned to the ground.
Right.
All across the South and in certain parts of the North. Like, look up what happened in Durham, North Carolina. I think it was Durham. That's not something that a lot of people know about. But if you research enough about Tulsa, you're gonna come up on, I think it was like Durham or Whitechapel, North Carolina.
I think that sounds familiar.
It was essentially the same thing that happened in Tulsa. Like there was
Right.
a black area of the town that was thriving, full of black owned businesses and homeowners, landowners, that was pretty much burned to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember if it was Whitechapel or Durham or whatever part of North Carolina is. There's like a cemetery there or a memorial. These things happen. Like Rosewood is just documented. Tulsa was documented. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying?
It this was significant to me. One, because as a black person who has, I was inspired by, the entrepreneurs in my family to have businesses, and you like it pisses me off when I see somebody throw trash out of a window in a neighborhood that they don't live in, or you I was coming down North Avenue, and it was a store that's across from the funeral home. And I walked into the store, and it was trash all around. And it was people standing out, and I was like, how can you,
Mm-hmm.
and not speaking about us in a negative way, but this is your business. This is your neighborhood. Like, I would be embarrassed to invite people to my home if I lived there. and
Mm-hmm.
and 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 it's not, all these conversations normally turn into beating down self, but at some point we have to find the value in who we are, so we're not totally put off or feeling like we have to fly to the white parts
Mm.
of town in order to
Right.
be successful or to be
Right.
prosperous. As an
Mm-hmm.
artist, it is hurtful to me when I hear my fellow artists say things like, I gotta go over there because they're gonna pay me better, or they're gonna treat me better, or the quality is gonna be better. And I know the
But don't
great
you
work that is
understand
happening
though?
here.
Don't you understand though?
Hmm.
Like let me ask you, like honestly, don't you understand though? A lot of times they talking about going somewhere where they're gonna be compensated more and they're gonna have less responsibility or less work.
Hmm.
You know
Because
what I'm
that's what's
saying?
gonna happen.
And like
That's
and
what's
like
gonna happen.
particularly because a lot of our organizations are struggling. So Nate, you know just as well as I know that you can be teaching artists for this organization, but you're like doing your lesson plans and all of your teaching artist shit. But then because you're working for this organization, it's kind of struggling because it's a black organization, and of course they're struggling bringing the money. So now you're also like you're like the assistant marketer, and you are the you're also 1/3 of the grant writing team,
Hmm.
and but you're still only getting paid as the teaching
Is that
artist,
one?
but you're
Hmm.
also like 1/3 of a grant writing team, and you are half of the marketing team, and you are, you know what I'm saying, uh you're wearing all these hats, which essentially just
Hmm.
burn you out. Like
Yeah.
no matter how much, no matter how much your passion is, no matter how much your gumption is, and your willingness to like go hard,
Yeah.
in that cut, like it just leads to burnout.
Yeah. And you want,
You know what I'm
and that's
saying?
why I said
So like, can you
it's
really
hard
blame
really.
people sometimes when
Yeah.
they're just like, all right, I'm gonna go over here
Yeah.
because now I get to be a teaching artist and that's it. You know what I'm saying? And they're gonna pay me more to be a teaching artist. And I don't have, they got their own market. They already paying for their own marketing team. They got a grant writing team. I don't have to write grants. I don't have to market anything.
And
All
I've
I
been
have
in
to
those
do
environments.
is
I've
produce.
been in those
But
environments,
then,
and
but then,
you
but
you
then you
lose a
feel
part
like
of yourself.
you lose a part of yourself. So there's the thing. Like the
Hmm.
choice, the balance, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. I just know that I've gotten to a place in my life that I can no longer sit back and just like, you know what I'm saying? Like when it's within reason, I just find it difficult to like judge or condemn people for those types of choices.
Right. That's what,
I do.
and that's what I said in the
I
beginning.
do.
It's hard to
It's hard.
condemn them, because ultimately the choice was, I just want better for myself. But the question that I say, and
But
right
not
now,
even.
the
But you're
question
like,
that I
but I would question
that's the
that because
at its
we
simplest
always
form.
tend to. That's what I would question because we always tend to frame it as like
Hey
this
Jared.
really like altruistically selfish decision where like it's all about me, 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 me. But Nate, like, saying just take using you as an example in that last example,
Mm-hmm.
coming from a place where you were responsible for teaching a group of students, but then
Mm.
you were being asked to like write letters and write grants and help to market the program and all of that stuff.
Yep.
Like there's a part of you that realizes that I can't give my all of what I do to the people I'm here to do it for, which is my students. So this organization now is giving me an opportunity to put all of my, you know, artistic power into being a teacher and taking everything that I've known and I've learned over the years and kind of putting it into a curriculum and like giving it to these young people. So when you make the decision to go over there, it's not just because I want more money. It's not because I'm Nate and I want more money. It's like I would like more money because who
Well,
wouldn't? But
we're not just money.
also
I want better.
I'm
I
giving
want to be in an
I'm better.
environment
And
where
this is better for me from a physical perspective. It's better for me
Mhm.
from a mental perspective, from a spiritual perspective, because that's really what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to perform and do my thing over here. And then I want to make my money when I'm not doing that by taking all of this wealth of knowledge that I know and imparting it on these students. And I want to that's all I want to do.
right.
Right. And that's
But
why
it
I
comes
always
with a
find
cost,
it
though.
problematic when when I hear people judging people for those decisions, because it's often not just this selfish, I want better for
Mhm.
myself. Like most of us, like if you're an artist, if you're an educator, there are if you work in the nonprofit industry, you clearly aren't all about self. Like if you wanted to be all about
Right.
self, you could easily go into an industry where you and your performance alone dictates your salary, dictates like the success, and that would be way easier
But what are you
than going over.
sacrificing? The question
What do you
becomes, what are you sacrificing? What do you have to sacrifice? What are you giving up for that freedom?
What's
Because as
freedom?
a
Like
on
working
both
in the
sides,
private sector.
and working in the private sector,
So
what are you giving up?
I think what you give up in the private sector is like I
Ownership.
think you give up I think you give up access to your personal life, because I think that a lot of people who are in competitive um in the private, very competitive private sector, I think
Mhm.
they put in a lot of hours, like beyond like the 9 to 5, 8 to 4 workday. So I think that's the
Yeah.
trade-off for them. And then on our side, the trade-off is that we end up trying to wear all the hats and fulfill all the needs, right? That's the
Yeah.
trade-off for us. So maybe I don't work, well into like the wee hours of the morning, but
Right.
in those hours that I'm
But you
working,
still working.
I'm
You
trying
still.
but in the hours that I do work, I'm trying to
Mhm.
balance being a teacher with a social worker,
Mhm.
with uh, a grant
A
writer,
therapist.
a therapist, with a marketing, with a marketing angle. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? So
Yep.
I just I feel like we need to find that place where we can all like come together and figure out how to connect. Because if you've gone over to the white organization and for whatever your reasons are, you still
Mhm.
you still have value.
But see,
And if
sometimes it. But the
and as
crazy
long
thing
as
is, no matter what side you find
Mhm.
yourself, your value is at stake. Your mental health is often still at stake,
Well,
and
I'm coming to the
it's
point
just
that I feel
it's
like that's just life.
it is. It really is, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to work over here. I needed to work over here because even over here, I still feel connected. Over here, there's a disconnect, but I have to always be monitored and questioned
Hmm.
and picked apart and conceptualized, like all those things that's gonna
Yeah.
drive me crazy.
So
But
that's where
over
the personal
here, I feel
decision.
overworked, underpaid, undernourished, all those things.
That's
But I still
that's
have
the
my name. Like you still have your name,
so okay.
integrity.
I'll give you another perspective on that.
Hmm.
Like, because I don't feel like for me, because I'm in a very similar position. I don't feel like for me it's like my name or anything like that.
Hmm.
I feel overworked. I feel overworked. I feel underpaid. The underappreciated or undervalued. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. I don't feel like I feel that. I feel like the organization that I
Hmm.
work for, um, very much like I feel like they do value me. Okay.
Hmm.
I think I lucked up though, because I think I work for an organization that really does try to center that, right? I feel like I'm overworked. I do feel like there's unrealistic expectations put on me, but I don't feel like the organization, the people who run the organ, I don't feel like I'm unappreciated. And at the
Right.
school that I'm at, I don't feel like I'm unappreciated. But I do feel like there's a lot of extra stuff. Um, but I choose to be over there because on the flip side of that is that I know that when I've done that job well, somebody is better off.
Hmm.
When I've done that job well, somebody is able to wake up in the morning and really be the best for the students, for these children that they can be,
Right.
right? Because I work almost primarily with parents, right? When I'm
Hmm.
doing my job well, a student has overcome a barrier that has been detrimental up to that point. And that's my why, right? But
Hmm.
it don't come without its sacrifices. It don't. It don't.
And that's life.
And I would
That's the
imagine,
part
and I
that
would
makes
imagine, and like my best
everyone
friend,
human.
my best friend is on the flip side of that. Like he literally works in the competitive, like private sector of marketing,
Hmm.
and he has the same aspirations and considerations that I do. His why is different though. He has
Hmm.
a very very different why from my why. Like his
Right.
why is not gonna work where I'm at, and my whys wouldn't work where he's at.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like we still find the common barrier,
I'm not asking
and
us
that's
to make this big exodus from white America. I am saying to keep your integrity in check and make sure you know
mm-hmm,
your why, because often we lose our why trying to cross over. We lose our why because either the
that is
benefits
true.
get better or the perks get
Or
better
the
or
position, or the
the
position.
position, and something
Yeah.
takes us farther and further away from our why. And then we end up doing something. We look up one day and we're totally disconnected from what our why was. And that's I don't feel validated because some white playwright or some white critic or some white curator or artistic director has said, you know what, you do good work. No more
Mm-hmm,
than I am not validated because a black person in those same spaces said I didn't do good work. Like
mm,
I feel like it's still my choice. What I will say is, as Black creators, as Black entrepreneurs, as Black community leaders, we have to stop ghosting our own communities, our own history, our own stories for the
uh,
pursuit of happiness. or the pursuit of more or the
Mm-hmm.
pursuit of better. You know what? I can do better if I just go over there. And then you don't hear from that person ever again
Well,
because
if
they're
that's
totally
their only,
disconnected.
if that's their only consideration, I
Right.
agree. Like I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's
Hmm.
just that most people, um, I don't, I personally feel like most people have a more nuanced and
Hmm.
a more intricate like reason for making those decisions than just like, oh, I'm gonna just go over here. I'm not saying that those people don't exist. I think they're a
Right.
lot. I think they're a lot fewer and far between than we realize. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
we've gotten to a place. I don't know, yo. Like I think we've gotten to a place where we try to lump a lot of people. Like as soon as we see something that even resembles it, we want to lump that person into that category. Um,
But see that because that person is it that position of a person is outdated. So now we call it out. What's happening now is we come as our full self. So I'm not
mhm,
pressing my hair, I'm not cutting my beard, I'm not removing my
right.
locks anymore. So now I'm coming into those entities as this. But let's monitor that person in year two, in year three, and see how far removed. And I'm not saying in every situation or even most. Let's just see how that typical person now. That person just looks different now. They're able to keep more of their aesthetics because now it's
Mhm,
unpopular to tell you cut them locks off, shave that beard,
mhm,
press their hair out, take that color out. It's not a popular thing to do that now. And now they've actually laws to say you can't do that anymore. But
mhm,
it is, I just don't want my value or the value of someone that looks like me to be shrunk because we put so much value into what they think of us,
mhm.
how we raise our children, how we teach our children, how we teach ourselves. How I just don't want to
Yeah, I
value
see what you're
myself
saying.
based off of someone who does not even take the
So
time
we just
to
gotta learn how to
understand me.
ignore. We
That's
gotta
it.
learn how to ignore them. We gotta learn how to ignore them.
Yeah, but if we keep on putting the Oscars up here and the NAACP award down here, that's not ignoring them. That's putting them on a pedestal that they
Well, that's what
sometimes
I.
don't
Well,
deserve.
that's what I mean by ignoring them. Like I wouldn't have no problem. I wouldn't have no problem. Like if we just collectively decided that like the NAACP is the end all be all for us.
Right.
The NAACP is the NAACP Image Awards is the end all be all. Like
Mm-hmm.
we not worried about the Oscars. We not worried about the Golden Globes. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I think the Tony Awards is kind of fair. I don't. I haven't heard too much issue about the Tony Awards, but there might be issues with that too.
It's still
But no,
there. I mean,
you
it's
know,
in
saying
every
like
space that we've had to break
BET
through.
is not really BET anymore. But um, I will say this about there's BET,
Hmm.
and I know that BET is not
It's not black owned anymore.
I know the person at the top of the food chain ain't black because it's owned by a conglomerate, a company now. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
but yo, like I'm not gonna lie, yo. Like I look at some of the shit on BET, and and I've always felt like I've always felt like regardless of who owned BET, they kind of try to live up to their name. Like I'm not saying that they were always perfect with it, but lately, like BET Plus. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? Like I'm like I look at some of the shit on there and I'm just like, yo, I might want to just cancel some of this other shit and just delve into what's on BET Plus for a while.
Hmm.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
mean,
Like, and then
because they have the money to compete with the black channels or the channels where the other black stuff is. And
well, what
now that
channels is
the
that?
pendulum is seemingly kind of in the middle now, a lot of those spaces aren't really pushing
So
out as much black content as it's been in the last couple years.
what stations? What stations are you talking about right now?
I remember saying to you, I feel like Netflix is kind of clearing out
Oh no
a lot of that black
Okay,
content.
so let me. Yeah, okay, so you might be right about that, but what I was talking about was like that these places that have been exclusively carved out for us.
Yeah,
that's what I was referring to. So I don't want to compare it to a Netflix that has like a section, right?
but those spaces typically use our content to jump themselves off. Remember the CW and what was the other one? Those spaces.
Yeah, but
they
I'm
were
not.
typically
Yeah, but
black
I'm not even.
spaces.
I feel you, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the ones like BET has
Like OWN and
like pretty much
TV1.
exclusively been catering to us for good and for bad, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
Since its inception,
But they're another. I mean, that we had. I don't want to say the Zeus Network because that's not really as popular. It's
But
popular, but
wait,
for the
what's the
wrong
Zeus
reasons.
Network?
But Zeus Network is the Bad Girls Club and the Baddies and the Bad Boys Club, stuff like that. It's black owned, but I mean, you can buy a cable station now. It doesn't cost as much as it used to, but
Right.
I think. Long story short, topic today was race and review, and it's just I'm open to. I feel like and my comment on one of those threads was I feel anybody can review anything, but we have to stop giving white opinions more weight than our own.
But let me ask
You can have 100 black people that says this was awesome, this was phenomenal. You have
So
two
then
white
we just need to
platforms that say
decide
it, and they
when.
get more weight.
But here's the thing. Why do they get more ratings? Right? Is it really because it's swaying our opinion, or is it just because we're outnumbered? And I want you to think about this for a second, right? Like you could have a film that's made by us, produced by us, for us, that gets trashed by the white critics, and it still goes on to be financially successful. The only thing we're really talking about here is validation in white spaces.
Yeah.
Realistically, because we know that if critics really had that much sway over the success of the film, right? Movies, actors and comedians, there would be a ton of black actors and comedians that would be completely out of work, right?
Right.
It's not that because they really don't sway anything when it comes to in the film space. They don't sway anything when it comes to film and TV.
They can prevent it from being even greenlit, though. They still hold that power. Yeah, because many of the production companies, despite there being more black producers and more black creators being able to produce, the ultimate distribution is still owned by white people.
But I don't think that I don't. But even within that system, I don't think it's critic reviews that they go off of. I think it's numbers.
Well, for me, even going deeper than the literal reviewer or critic, for me, this conversation went, and we did go deeper than that. It goes deeper than the person who just writes a blog entry or writes a newspaper article about how they liked or disliked something. I think the reviewer is much deeper than that. It's the person who owns that distribution company. It's the person who owns that movie theater. It goes a lot deeper than just the person who writes the article. That influence that has been had, I can see it changing, but we have to totally knock down that power structure, allow them to exist, but knock down the power that they have over our work to even be greenlit.
I don't think we have to worry about that power structure. Like the funny thing is, like if black people just tomorrow decided that, like, you know what, we ain't worried about the Academy Awards, we ain't worried about this, we're gonna put our money behind, like if black people decided that, like, if enough of us are like, yo, y'all need to see this, we're gonna go out and we're gonna buy a ticket to see it. You know what I'm saying? Or we're gonna buy it when it,
like
we're gonna rent it or
Broadway.
buy it. We're gonna rent it or buy it when it's available on demand. I still believe in America, like money talks, bullshit walks, and like the one thing that we got going for us right now is that I think it would be really, really more. I think it would be incredibly difficult to pull off, and a Tulsa or a Rosewood or one of those types things, and today.
You said it would be difficult to do that?
I think it would be not. You know what? I don't know. I don't even want to know if difficult is the right word. I think it would be incredibly unwise to try to do some shit like that today. I just think that I just think that the overall code. No. To destroy it.
Okay.
And the way that a Tulsa or a Rosewood was destroyed.
Because I was about to say
the
that
irony of all the things is that I think we live in a time period now where two things. One, I think that Black people are in a much, much better position to defend themselves or defend their things when we build something up. But two, I also think that there's a lot less people that would be okay with some shit like that happening, like who are not Black. I think there's a lot less people who would be okay with in 2023 a fucking Tulsa type shit happening wholesale. So we could build
it would be
out
much
our own
harder
things.
for them to do what they've done. I agree with you.
Right. We could build out our own things and we could just start by supporting the BET Awards and the NAACP Image Awards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just let them
simple.
Take a movie like The Banshees of Ireland or whatever the fuck that was, which I heard was a whole fucking snooze fest, and let them give it Best Picture of the Year, right? And then we can sit over here and debate around whether Black Panther or the Woman King should have won, or Till should have won Best Picture at the NAACP Image Awards, and let them have their shit, and just we can be over here. Because the truth of the matter is, we don't have. That's the only thing that I feel like the whole gist of this is if something is financially viable, white people still going to invest in it because money talks.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the critics. The funny thing is, I don't think the critics have any sway over box office or how much money a film produces, because when you look year over year, most of the films that are nominated for Best Picture and pulling their names in for Best Actress and Best Actor, Best Supporting and all that shit, they be small films that didn't have huge box office to begin with.
But to be honest, this conversation came from a number of conversations where
you should just
people were
shit.
not necessarily angry, but more so it was a push to really support our own.
We should stop talking about it. The best thing that Black people could do as artists and those who support art, whether it's music, whether it's film, theater, all that shit, the best thing we can do is shut the fuck up. And then just don't show up for the Grammys. Just don't tune in.
And that's my point on social media.
Don't show up for the Oscars. Don't show up for the Oscars. I
want to hear about the stuff that you love.
Don't tune in. But here's the thing.
That's the kind of the path that I want to see happen.
The flip side is this. We got to show up when the NAACP Image Awards is on. You ain't got to watch that shit, nigga. Just have a TV in the house with the shit on.
Yeah.
You don't want to watch? Don't watch. You know what I'm saying? But you should watch.
Or for me, I need us to be more collective, or individually rather, in supporting the stuff that we love. I'm tired of hearing about the stuff that you don't like. I want to hear about the stuff. That was the whole point of us doing this. And that's been my whole agenda for keeping it pushing, because I want to hear about the stuff you love.
The problem is and when it comes to theater, I wish we had a way to get more Black people into theater. Theater is fucking awesome. Like the fact that we don't get like stop going to shit at Everyman. Stop going to shit.
We have to support our black actors.
But here's the thing. It's a circular thing, right?
Well, let me tell you real quick before you say that. The reason, but no, I'm telling you, the reason we're seeing more authentic black stories being told at those types of spaces is because people are coming out to see them. And that is the crazy, and it's just that simple. It sounds.
But are they coming out? But wait. But let me ask you a serious question. Are they coming out to see him because of the stories themselves, or are they coming out to see him because of the venue? Because we tell these same stories.
I think it's the story, and I think it's the faces that are in those stories.
Well, I'd like to see us just take those stories, and it's hard, and that's the harder thing. I think theater is the harder thing. Because, I was going to say this earlier, I think that critics do have a lot of sway with theater. Because I feel like you can put out a theater review and people will be like, maybe I won't go see this on Broadway.
I'll say on the higher end, like Broadway, I think it matters because people are traveling there to see it. Right. And that plays a big part. But it also, I think that individual power that criticism used to have or reviewers used to have, it's starting to be diminished. If we start to sway and use our voices collectively on social media and such, and begin to support the things that we love. But we focus so much on the stuff that we don't like or why we don't like it. If we just went to go see, Strange Loop and Ain't No More and all of those wonderful plays, Audra McDaniel just did an awesome piece. If we focused on that versus I'm tired of seeing Cats on Broadway, well, you just gave it another nod.
But here's my thing. Here's my thing. Are we going to see Cats on Broadway?
No, but it's staged right now. Somebody's going to see it.
I know somebody going to see it, but it ain't us. We ain't going to see Cats.
Sometimes it is, unfortunately.
We ain't going 3 and 4 times. No, I might.
Unfortunately,
I'm not going to say.
Why else would it still be there? It can't be others alone.
Though. It's not us. It's not us. It could be them. Cats is not ours.
Yeah, but
so they might just be supporting that shit. I guarantee you, there's some ticket holders in them Broadway theaters that come to see Cats once a year, and they be like, "Oh shit, we gotta go." Nate.
But that's not enough to keep them doors open, though.
I think it is.
So it's not, because we're clearly saying we had people like big name people buying out seats to these black shows. It was not enough for them.
But wait. How often are they buying out seats? Because you mentioned that earlier in the show. I gotta go soon. And we coming up. We just crossed.
Yeah, the 2-hour mark. Yeah. Don't be looking at the clock. I think his thing has frozen. So we are coming up on the end of this show, and I'm happy about that. This has been a very great conversation, and yeah. Are you there? Is it me or you? It looks like it might be. I don't know. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close out, and I'm going to say until next week. It's going to be George's Choice next week, so I don't know. Peace out, everybody.
Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
Artist Exchange Live.
The Artist Exchange. Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
Starts now.
Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.